This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Philadelphia to Erie and from Pittsburgh to Scranton, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow for the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined in this special edition of the Arnold Report by our chairman, the chairman of Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and one of the state's foremost business individuals, Mr. Ed Arnold. Ed, welcome back to the show.
Charlie, good to see you.
It's so nice of you to come and join us again. We want to start out with the Arnold Report. We've had a few new questions being submitted by our viewers, and again, we urge our viewers to send in by email new questions for Mr. Arnold on anything having to do with economics and personal finance. We have one question here in relationship to the election of President-elect Trump, and that is, with the election of President Trump, what do you foresee will be happening with interest rates in the United States? Are they going to go up, going to go down, stay the same? Too unpredictable. Well, when you look into your crystal ball, what do you see, Ed?
Well, it appears that the course is set right now to go up. Obviously, everybody...
Okay, I got to stop you right there. How far up?
Well, that, of course, is way more, you're going out. They're going to go up slowly, and it basically depends on numbers in the future. I'm talking about the first up is going to be very shortly in December. And based on the numbers that have come out with unemployment and so on, the Fed has pretty well signaled there will be a small increase in their next meeting, which is their December meeting.
Why do they want to have an increase in interest rates?
Well, first of all, they've kept them artificially low. Historically, we've never done anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they're trying to theoretically normalize, which really isn't possible because there's so much debt they can't possibly go normal. But at the same time, with employment getting tight, inflation is probably going to start to pick up, especially with Trump. I mean, Trump, assuming he is able to do what he's talking about, he's going to create a lot of new jobs. He's going to have more aggressive government spending, specifically on infrastructure. And this, therefore, will cause inflation, which is a justification for raising interest rates.
Mm-hmm. So you think the Federal Reserve will increase slowly and incrementally interest rates in the United States? What about the central banks in Europe? Do you think they're going to follow suit or not, Ed?
Now that is really, that's even more difficult. Obviously, you saw that 2 days ago, the Italian people voted basically against the existing government. In fact, it just as like in England, the Prime Minister had said that he will resign if this vote goes negative. The vote went negative by almost 60%. So it was an overwhelming rejection of his policies. Now the question is, who's going to take his place if, in fact, the new competing party called the Five Star, in fact, does get control of the government? They have said they will have basically a plebiscite, a vote on whether Italy should stay in the common market. If Italy gets out of the common market, there will be major unsettlement in Europe. In fact, the common market will be in danger of survival because Italy is, in the mainland, is the third largest economy. This is not like a Greece. This is a very large country that also is in very bad shape. Most of their banks are absolutely a disaster. As an example, I saw the oldest bank in the world, ironically, is in Italy, and right now it's on non-performing loans are 18%. To give you an idea, our non-performing loans in America, our major banks, are on 2%. This is absolutely a disaster. Its ability to raise money now that this plebiscite was negative is even more in jeopardy. So Italy itself is in a very difficult position. If Italy, let's say, crumbles, what will the overall common market do, and therefore what will the central bank of there do? It gets more problematic.
Well, the interesting thing is it's even more complicated than that. As you know, Ed, you not only have the recent plebiscite in Italy, but then you have differences between the northern Italians and the southern Italians. With the northern Italians have had political parties for some time, the Northern Alliance, for example, that wants to sever relationships with all parts of Italy south of Rome. Because they believe that they work harder, that they contribute more to the economy, that they have a different way of life than Southern Italians. And then that gets even more complicated, doesn't it?
Well, let's put it, I don't know that move has a major impetus, like in the United States, should California secede from the Union.
Well, this is a lot longer standing than California's complaint, which dates just back to the presidential election, doesn't it?
Well, no, it dates back further than that. I mean, the separation now in the last dozen years or so between the East Coast and the West Coast and the rest of the country it's becoming a greater divide. Obviously, you're saying it's a little more historical in Italy, but the fact is that I would say right now the more major thing is, can the common market survive? And therefore, that would automatically cause major economic distress in the world if the euro got in trouble, since it is the largest single economy in the world.
Staying on interest rates for just a second, of course, we have a situation in recent months where Germany's had, some banks have had negative interest. How does that respond to this situation and the election of Donald Trump as president?
Well, that is where the separation between we're moving to increase interest rates, even though small, and the rest of the world has continued. There is stimulus now in the world, in both Switzerland and in Japan, where not only are they buying back all these bonds, which is depressing interest rates, they're even starting to buy back stocks. So the government's manipulation of the world's economies in the different countries is so unprecedented that where will it take us, and how will we eventually, I keep using the world, what we're doing is totally unsustainable. What is going to happen when we get to that point where you can no longer manipulate? And that's really what these banks have been done. Right now, actually, the one is that the most unique is in Switzerland, the 10-year Swiss government bond is negative. Switzerland is the most aggressive of anybody because they are theoretically the soundest country in the world. But even they have manipulated the interest rates. And so I think they're now, I believe it's 1/3 of major government sovereign debt is negative.
Boy, to navigate these financial waters, I'd want someone with the experience and the background that you have, which leads us to our second question. With the election of Donald Trump as president, what does this mean for the ordinary American investor? What should the ordinary investor expect? What should the ordinary investor do with a Trump administration, Ed?
Well, first of all, there's two parts. Number one thing that we can say for sure, there will be a major tax bill. And they're all practical purposes.
A tax decrease.
A decrease, yes. Well, there'll be a change in our tax structure. Number one, there will be a decrease in the basic rate for corporations and for businesses probably, but primarily for corporations.
What about individuals?
Well, let's just finish the corporation first.
Okay.
Right now, America has the highest corporate taxes in the world.
Yes.
Period. The average country in the developed world, their interest rates are somewhere around 20%, with a low of Ireland at around, I think, around 12. We're at 40. So therefore, in fact, we're higher than that because we have a state corporate income tax in many of our states, most of our states, which averages about 5%. Plus, we have a national tax of 39%. That's before all the loopholes. That's what makes it more complicated. Definitely that tax, the federal, which is actually technically 39%, is talked about going down between 15 and 20, which would make it competitive in the rest of the world. Not lower, just competitive. But at the same time, we're talking here, there is winners and losers. Because some corporations, because of all the loopholes, are paying very little taxes right now. And some are paying the maximum rate. So if you were to invest in a company that's paying high corporate taxes today, that will be a winner. Mm-hmm. If you're investing in somebody that has major loopholes, and those loopholes may be closed, that's the big question. We're definitely going to lower the corporate rate. That, I think, is an absolute. What we're going to do with all the loopholes, that's where the lobbyists and the entire, I'm going to say, corruption of our our House and Senate, where there is so much control of what's going on as far as the tax law. Our
The
tax
influence
laws
of the lobbyists over the laws.
over the loopholes and keeping it. So overall, what you really have to do now is see who are going to be the winners and losers. The big winner is going to be the people that are paying the highest taxes right now. The losers could very well be those who are getting a lot of loopholes.
Mm-hmm.
So it is actually, it's going to make it more challenging than ever to actually look at who are going to be the winners and losers. And this is why it's, overall, will the market probably go up, at least for the time being, because of the stimulus? Yes. At the same time, that could reverse if Europe literally collapses, because then no matter what happens here, we are still a world economy.
Mm-hmm. In the last 30 seconds of this segment, is the dollar going up or down?
At this point, the dollar will continue to get stronger because obviously the rest of the world's interest rates, I do not see them particularly changing, and our interest rates are going to go up.
Okay.
That will make the dollar stronger.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ed. We want to go to our second segment. We'll be right back after this. Rejoin us in just a minute.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. The Pennsylvania Chamber serves as the frontline advocate for business on Pennsylvania's Capitol Hill by influencing the legislative, regulatory, and judicial branches of state government. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by Blackford Ventures, LLC, a private equity firm seeking to make significant investments in real estate, proven business enterprises, and their leaders. Find out more at www.blackfordventures.com. And by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. And in this segment, I'm joined by my normal co-host, Mara Donnelly. Mara, welcome.
Thank you, Charlie. It's great to be here. I was going to laugh at the use of the word normal, but we'll let that slide.
Well, you are normal.
I am.
You're normal in every sense of the word.
For the most part.
And speaking of looking forward to the future,
Yes.
we were probably talking about this. We'll be talking about this in the future as the new year approaches. Do you have any special plans?
For the new year, I'd like to travel as much as possible. That's my...
Are you going to the Rose Bowl to see Penn State?
I will not be going to the Rose Bowl. I might be the only person left here in Harrisburg, but I will not be going to the Rose Bowl.
Well, congratulations to all the people in Happy Valley. Congratulations to the
all their fans.
Penn State football team. It was a miraculous year, and what a great game that they just had
Big
to.
Ten championship was a great game.
To win the Big
really
Ten.
Great game. A lot of fun to watch. So.
Well, on that note, we'd like to welcome back someone who's also interested in making things better in Pennsylvania, a guest that we've had in the past, Paul Addis. Paul, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Paul, you are a retired businessman, one of the most successful businessmen, I think, in the country and in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
That's a definitive exaggeration.
Well, I don't think so. And, of course...
We speak the truth here. Nothing but the truth.
And, of course, you have been trying to improve political dialogue and policy discussion in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And you're back again to continue that discussion. Could you, again, there's some new people that have tuned in, and I'd like to ask you if you could give an introduction of yourself again.
Sure, of course. So I am, as you said, a retired business person. I spent 30 years in the commodity grain business, and then the energy business. More in the energy business than the grain, but experience in both.
And those are challenging businesses. Those are tough businesses.
My involvement in both those businesses has some parallels to the way I see what's going on in terms of my view of how to improve the state of our policy discussions and our state, because I was always a change agent. My career after the early days was involved in constantly being the person chosen to fix a broken business or to create a new business. The largest one that I was involved in was in the deregulation of electricity. And candidly, I led the first effort to involve third parties or an insurgent, newcomers, to enter the business and do wholesale electric transactions across the U.S. grid from California to the East Coast. So the company that I worked for at that time and was the first company to actually do transactions across the electric grid, which was not a utility. And that was...
That's enormous. That makes you a real trailblazer.
Well, what that did was that change led to a great deal of efficiency emerging across the electric industry, which we are now seeing. It's both had fits and starts, but it's a more efficient business today than it was when we began our efforts in the mid-1990s. So I've been in the grain and energy business, but always been interested and involved in some way in public policy, in doing volunteer work across my community. The last thing I'd comment on, which I have before, is I am very happily married for 37 years and have 4 wonderful kids.
We love hearing that over, because that's so rare. It seems these days.
That's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. Well, as a change agent, we have a lot of issues facing Pennsylvania. One is the rising cost of education here in Pennsylvania, and can you tell us how you would attack that or address the rising cost here?
Sure. Well, what I'm going to quickly speak to is the rising cost of college and university education,
right,
which is a national problem, and of course Pennsylvania is right in the thrust of that. Just a quick review of the facts. As late as 1990, a young person could enter public university and pay $500 or the equivalent of a summer job to pay their tuition and fees. At Harvard University, which obviously is an illustrious institution, it took an average family 13 weeks in 1990 of a median income to pay for a year of tuition and fees at Harvard. Today, a public education will take 17 or 18,000 at Penn State for tuition and fees, let alone living costs, which is the equivalent of 15 or 20 weeks of median household income. And at the Harvard level or the private university level, University of Pennsylvania, it takes 52 weeks of income. So there has been a radical change. Why has that change occurred? It's my view, and I think a lot of experts agree, there's a list of reasons, which go from tremendous expenditures at the college and university level for new facilities, for recreational facilities. People talk about, quote, the climbing wall university, that we now have sort of many more activities for students. But so there's greater expenditures. We have had a 50% rise in the number of people entering college since 1990, which puts pressure on demand is growing. I think we should think about colleges in terms of supply and demand, but the demand has grown. That has been encouraged by looser admission standards and by easy access to loans. There's no question that the easy access to getting a loan to enter college has also led to this greater entree into school as well, and then greater competition among the schools for students, but always encouraging students to take a loan if necessary to pay for tuition. But this has reached, I think, a breaking point for American families. What can we do about it? At the public level in Pennsylvania, we have a series of boards which oversee our public colleges and universities. And those boards are comprised of representatives from the governors, that our governors appoint, student representatives, members of the legislature, and the governor in most cases, and the Secretary of Education. But what what they focus on almost annually is what should be the tuition increase and where to spend money. As I've said before, I think there is a lack of leadership and innovative strategic thinking. So what can we do differently to attempt to get ahead of this problem and make college more affordable? Well, the first thing I think we ought to think about is both raising admission standards at colleges, which would in effect reduce demand, but simultaneously increase the funds for junior college and for apprenticeship programs. There are a tremendous number of attractive jobs, high-paying jobs, which need technical skills, which do not necessarily require entrance into college. So I think if we both raise standards but also made those apprenticeship programs and work-study programs more available at the junior college level and at the college level, Drexel's a leader in that, that would be, I think, would take some of the pressure off, number one. Number two, as from my vantage point, we live in an age where information is available to us, easily available to us. So I would use the internet, and I think many students can take some portion of their college classes online. That would be both allow students to speed through courses if they're ready for that, but additionally take tremendous pressure off the cost structure of colleges. We can graduate a number of our students earlier. There's no reason why in this day and age students couldn't graduate in 3 years. I was in the military for a period of time between college and between high school and college, and graduated in 3.5 years. I probably could have relatively easily done it in 3 years if I had chosen to put my nose to the grindstone. So I think we can graduate students earlier, we can use online education, but we can merge the use of online education and the college campus. We can also think about the following, which I think is rather important. We may give, the state provides dollars and cents to our colleges and universities, but maybe we ought to think about providing those dollars to students who matriculate so they can make choices, which puts, again, pressure on the university system to reform, to rethink its cost structure. But what we need, again, is leadership and innovation, which is what we need in every aspect of our government across the state of Pennsylvania and across our country. So I think there's a lot we can do to drive down those costs, make education beyond the K through 12 level both affordable and useful to our students.
I think there are several organizations in Pennsylvania that would be highly interested in hearing your thoughts, and they might not necessarily agree with everything you're saying, but you know, the basic concept of leadership and driving down costs is hard to dispute.
Well, it's not, in driving down costs, what I think about is strategy. I think about how can we do things better. So maintaining the status quo may be attractive if that is optimal for the citizens of Pennsylvania. That's fine if it's in the interests of the vast majority of our citizens. But I don't believe in the status quo for the sake of status quo.
Yeah.
And I believe leaders must question, all who are given the responsibility to lead must question, and especially in these days where we all feel this need to change things up. So I don't have, my view isn't change for the sake of change, it's change when there is a better way to do things. And I believe there are a number of steps we could take which would improve access via lowering cost.
Mm-hmm. Well, Paul, when we look at the state as a whole, when we look at the state budget, what has been true for many, many years was education was always the number one cost. In the Commonwealth, we've seen in recent years that the costs of social welfare programs have exceeded that. Do you have some ideas on how to deal with this increasing demand for social services that we see in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Well, I mean, once again, this is a national problem, but Pennsylvania is on the forefront of that problem because we have, on a demographic basis, the oldest I think the second oldest population across the 50 states. So that makes the pressure even greater. But I don't think that tightening the budget is the answer. Cost control, while always important and every dollar should be studied before we spend it, I don't really think we will find, if we follow again the status quo, we'll find the solution to rising social expenditures. I think what we need to do again is innovate. One of the things that I've mentioned before on your show is I believe that we should attempt to simplify how we provide support to the neediest among us. And the way I would contemplate doing that is income support for those working. So I would provide income support as opposed to a myriad of programs which in providing so many different programs, we have tremendous administrative costs and an inability to follow where all that money is going. And so I would try to simplify and encourage work and encourage people by providing income support as opposed to a myriad of programs. That would be one central issue of what I would look for. I would also attempt to expand the number of young people, which will take time, so these aren't short-term solutions, but I would attempt to encourage young people both to stay in Pennsylvania and to come to Pennsylvania. And what I would think of, I am one who does not like special programs which lead to crony capitalism. But I think in this case, with the demographics of our state, the way they exist, I would have a tax rebate for working young people who are here for 7 or 8 years. So they would get a rebate after they'd been here 7 or 8 years on their taxes to try to encourage more young people to come to the state to change the demographics, once again to take the pressure off our expanding social welfare payments.
Paul, these are fresh, new ideas that I think Harrisburg hasn't heard or dealt with, and we hope that Harrisburg will be listening to you. And we think that some of these things may become public debate here in the very near future. Well, we are out of time. We'll be back again next week with a new edition of Behind the Headlines. Turn in then.